To my son, Daniel Westbrook, I leave my entire estate, all assets, properties, and holdings valued at approximately $67 million. The words hung in the air like smoke. I sat frozen in the leather chair that had always felt too expensive for my jeans, while the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Across from me, my three siblings transformed before my eyes. Eliza's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. Michael's jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. And Thomas, always the dramatic one, actually laughed as if waiting for the punchline. There was no punchline, only the stern voice of Dad's attorney continuing to read the document that had just turned my life upside down. Just 12 hours earlier, I'd been in my cramped apartment above Mrs. Geller's garage, trying to decide if I could afford to fix my leaking shower or just keep using the bucket for another month. I'd been the one who sat by Dad's hospital bed for those final weeks, while my siblings jetted in for occasional appearances between their important meetings and glamorous vacations. I'd been the one who listened to him, even when his words cut deep. You know, Danny, he'd said 3 weeks before the end, during one of his more lucid moments, "You've always been the least successful of my children." He'd said it so matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. I nodded and continued adjusting his pillows. What else could I do? He wasn't saying anything I hadn't heard 1,000 times before. Now, sitting in the oppressively ornate conference room of Daniels, Wright & Associates, I was apparently worth $67 million. And my siblings looked ready to tear me limb from limb. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Eliza hissed, her voice slicing through the silence. "There must be some mistake." "I can assure you, Ms. Westbrook, there is no mistake," Mr. Daniels replied, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your father was extremely specific and of sound mind when these changes were made 3 months ago." 3 months ago? Michael's voice boomed. He was the oldest at 38, the golden boy who'd followed Dad into investment banking. When he was already sick. When Danny here was playing the dutiful son. How convenient. I found my voice small and uncertain. I had no idea. "Oh, bullshit," Thomas spat, standing up so quickly his chair rolled back and hit the wall. "You manipulated him when he was vulnerable. All those private conversations, all that time alone. You were working him for this." The accusation felt like a physical blow. For years, I'd lived in the shadows of my siblings' achievements. Michael's Wall Street success, Eliza's thriving architectural firm, Thomas's tech startup that had made him a millionaire by 25. Meanwhile, I'd bounced between jobs, tried my hand at writing, volunteered at the local shelter, and generally failed to accumulate the wealth and status that defined success in my father's eyes. "Mr. Daniels," I said, turning to the attorney, "I swear I didn't know anything about this." "There's more," Mr. Daniels said, clearing his throat. "Your father left a letter to be read in this circumstance." He produced an envelope from a folder, breaking the seal with a silver letter opener that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The room fell silent again as he began to read. "To my children, if you're hearing this letter, then Danny is sitting there looking shell-shocked, while the rest of you are contemplating how quickly you can contest this will. Dad always did know us well. Before you waste your inheritance on legal fees, let me explain my decision. Success isn't measured by the numbers in your bank account or the title on your business card. I learned this too late. I pushed all of you toward what I thought was success, money, power, influence, and 3 of you followed that path brilliantly. But Daniel chose differently. He chose to live by values I only claim to have. For the past year, I've had private investigators following each of you. A collective gasp filled the room. My siblings exchanged panicked glances. "Michael, you've been deliberately misleading investors, promising returns you know are impossible. Eliza, your firm has been cutting corners on safety regulations, putting lives at risk to increase your profit margins. Thomas, your tech company has been selling user data to questionable overseas entities, despite your privacy promises. Meanwhile, Daniel, my least successful child, has been living with integrity. The volunteer work at the homeless shelter, the unpaid articles exposing corporate corruption, the way you gave your last $100 to Mrs. Geller when her medication costs increased. These are the markers of true success. I was wrong about many things, but most of all, I was wrong about you, Danny. You are, by far, the most successful of my children. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Consider this my final lesson to all of you. Michael, Eliza, Thomas, you each have your own wealth. Use it better than I taught you. Daniel, use this inheritance to continue being the person you already are. Mr. Daniels folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. The room was so quiet I could hear the antique clock ticking on the wall. This is outrageous, Michael finally said, his face flushed red. Dad was clearly not in his right mind. I have extensive documentation proving otherwise, Mr. Daniels replied coolly, including video recordings of your father explaining his decision. We'll fight this, Eliza said, smoothing her skirt as if preparing for battle. We'll take it to court. You're welcome to try, Mr. Daniels said, though I advise against it. Your father's evidence regarding your business practices might become public record in that case. That silenced them momentarily, but I knew this was just the beginning. The conference room suddenly felt suffocating. I need some air, I muttered, standing up on shaky legs. No one tried to stop me as I stumbled out into the hallway. I found myself in the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to process what had just happened. In the mirror, I saw the same ordinary guy I'd always been. Faded jeans, secondhand button-up, the perpetual shadows under my eyes from working night shifts at the local bookstore to supplement my meager freelance writing income. The bathroom door swung open, and Thomas stormed in, his normally handsome face contorted with rage. You think you've won, don't you? He snarled, backing me against the sink. This isn't a competition, Thomas. It's always been a competition. Dad made sure of that. And now you've somehow convinced him that your pathetic excuse for a life is worth rewarding. I felt something snap inside me. Years of feeling inadequate, of enduring condescension, of being the family disappointment. My pathetic life? I pushed back, surprising both of us. At least I can look at myself in the mirror without wondering how many people I've screwed over today. At least I sleep at night without worrying about investigations or lawsuits. Thomas's eyes widened briefly before narrowing again. You have no idea what it takes to be successful in this world. Maybe I don't want your kind of success. He laughed bitterly. Well, now you get to have both, your precious moral high ground and all the money. How convenient. He jabbed a finger into my chest. But don't think for a second this is over. We're not just going to walk away. After Thomas stormed out, I stayed in the bathroom, trying to regain my composure. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Daniels. Take your time. When you're ready, there's more to discuss in private. When I returned to the conference room, my siblings were gone. Mr. Daniels sat alone, organizing papers into neat stacks. They've gone to consult their respective attorneys, he explained, though I doubt they'll get far. Your father was very thorough. I never asked for this, I said, collapsing back into my chair. He knew that. Mr. Daniels slid a small USB drive across the polished table. Your father wanted you to watch this alone. An hour later, I sat in my car in the parking garage, laptop open, staring at my father's face on the screen. He looked gaunt but clear-eyed, recording this message perhaps a month before his death. Danny, he began, and I was struck by how gentle his voice sounded, so different from the commanding tone he'd used throughout my childhood. By now you know about my decision. I'm sure you're overwhelmed, maybe even angry with me for putting you in this position. Your siblings won't make this easy. He sighed, adjusting himself in what I recognized as a study chair. I owe you an explanation, and more importantly, an apology. When your mother died, something broke in me. I channeled all my grief into accumulating wealth and status, and I pushed you kids to do the same. 3 of you complied. You resisted. Dad looked down, seeming to gather his thoughts. I resented you for it. I thought you were wasting your potential. But a few months ago, I discovered something that changed everything. He reached for something off-screen and held up a familiar leather-bound journal. My breath caught. It was Mom's. I found your mother's journals while preparing to sell the house. She wrote about all of you, but her entries about you, she saw something in you that I was blind to. She wrote that you had my drive, but her heart, and that combination would make you different from your siblings. She was worried I wouldn't understand you. Dad's eyes glistened. She was right. I didn't understand until I started watching you more closely. The way you live your life, Danny, it's how she would have wanted all of us to live. It's how I should have taught all of you to live. He set the journal down. I know money has never motivated you, but I'm giving you my fortune because I trust you to use it wisely. You don't have to keep it all. Share it if you want, donate it, use it to make a difference. But I'm putting it in your hands because they're the only hands I trust not to be corrupted by it. The video continued with practical matters, details about properties, accounts, investment portfolios, but my mind was stuck on his words about Mom. She died when I was 15, and in many ways, that was when Dad and I had started growing apart. I'd always assumed she would have been as disappointed in my life choices as he was. I closed the laptop, overwhelmed. The concrete parking garage felt surreal, too ordinary a setting for such a life-altering moment. My phone buzzed incessantly, likely my siblings coordinating their attack. I ignored it and drove. Without conscious decision, I found myself heading toward the family estate in Westchester County. Dad had been planning to sell it before he got sick. Now, apparently, it was mine. The guard at the gate recognized me and waved me through with a surprised expression. I hadn't been here in months. The sprawling mansion looked the same as always, imposing, immaculate, and cold. I used my old key to let myself in. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old books hit me immediately, bringing a rush of memories. I wandered through the quiet rooms, touching surfaces, opening drawers, seeing the house with new eyes. In Dad's study, everything was meticulously organized, just as he'd kept it throughout his life. I sat in his leather chair, running my hands over the worn armrests. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. Voices echoed through the foyer. My siblings had arrived together, a united front. "He's here." I heard Eliza call out, presumably spotting my car outside. I stayed seated, waiting for the confrontation I knew was coming. Their footsteps grew louder until all three appeared in the doorway of the study. "Comfortable in Dad's chair already?" Michael sneered. I didn't rise to the bait. "What do you want?" Eliza stepped forward, adopting her most reasonable tone, the one she used when presenting to difficult clients. "We've been talking, Danny. This situation is unprecedented and shocking for all of us. We think there's a sensible solution," Thomas added. "The will is clearly flawed, but rather than drag this through the courts, which would be unpleasant for everyone, we propose a fair split." "Fair," I echoed. 25% each, Michael said firmly. "Equal shares, as it should have been all along. Everyone wins, no messy legal battle, no family secrets exposed." I studied their faces. The siblings I'd grown up with, competed with, loved despite everything. They'd always been a unit with me on the outside. Now they stood before me, not grieving our father, but strategizing how to get what they felt entitled to. "Did any of you actually watch the videos Mr. Daniels provided? About your business practices?" They exchanged glances. "That's private," Eliza said stiffly. "Is it true?" I pressed. "What Dad said in his letter." Michael's expression hardened. "Business is complicated, Danny. You've never understood that. Sometimes lines get blurred for the greater good. The greater good of your bank account. Don't be naive," Thomas scoffed. "Everyone bends rules. The difference is some of us are actually building something meaningful." I stood up slowly. Dad left everything to me for a reason. I think I need to understand exactly what that reason was before I make any decisions. Eliza's composure cracked. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm telling you I need time. This all happened hours ago. I haven't even processed it yet." "We need an answer now," Michael demanded. "We've already spoken to our lawyers." I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Then let them talk to Mr. Daniels. I'm not making any decisions today." "You ungrateful little," Thomas started, but Eliza grabbed his arm. "Fine," she said coolly. "Take your time. But remember, we can make this very public and very ugly. Your choice." After they left, hurling a few more threats on their way out, I continued exploring the house. In my father's bedroom, I found a box of Mom's things he'd kept, photos, letters, and more of her journals. I spent hours reading her words, learning how she'd seen each of us, discovering her hopes and fears. Evening fell, and I found myself in the kitchen, making a simple sandwich, a strange contrast to the day's extraordinary events. My phone rang, a different tone this time. It was Rachel, my closest friend and the one person who'd stood by me through all my failures. "Hey," I answered, realizing I hadn't spoken to anyone normal all day. "You wouldn't believe the day I've had." "Actually, I might," she said. "It's all over the business news. Westbrook Empire heir apparent shunned in favor of a strange son." "Are you okay?" I laugh hollowly. "I don't know what I am. Rich, apparently. Where are you? Do you want company?" "I'm at the family house. And yes, actually, I could use a sane person right now." An hour later, Rachel arrived, bringing cheap wine and her comforting presence. We sat in the kitchen, the one room in the house that had always felt somewhat normal, and I told her everything. "Wow," she said when I finished. "That's a lot to process." "Yeah." I took a long sip of wine. "The thing is, I keep waiting to feel happy about this, but I just feel burdened and guilty somehow." Rachel studied me thoughtfully. "Guilty for what? You didn't ask for this." "No, but part of me feels vindicated that Dad finally saw what my siblings are really like." "What does that say about me?" "It says you're human." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "So what are you going to do?" I stared into my glass. "I have no idea. They want me to split it evenly. And part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. But another part thinks they might be right." Rachel finished. "No," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "I don't think they're right. I think Dad was right. They already have more than enough money, and they've shown what they do with it. But maybe there's a middle path." We talked late into the night, brainstorming possibilities. Rachel had always been good at challenging me, making me think more deeply about things. By midnight, a plan was beginning to form in my mind. The next morning, I called Mr. Daniels and asked him to arrange a meeting with my siblings for that afternoon. Then I spent hours reviewing the detailed files my father had left, the evidence of my siblings' questionable business practices, but also the full extent of his fortune and how it was structured. When they arrived, they came prepared for battle, each flanked by a personal attorney. We gathered in the dining room, the massive table creating physical distance between us. "Before we start," I said, "I want to be clear that this meeting is just us, no lawyers." Predictably, they protested, but I stood firm. Either we talk as siblings or not at all. After a tense standoff, they reluctantly asked their attorneys to wait outside. The four of us sat facing each other, the weight of our shared history and current conflict hanging in the air. "I've made my decision," I began, "and it's not negotiable." Michael opened his mouth to object, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. I've reviewed everything. The will, Dad's letters, and all the evidence he gathered about each of you. I met each of their eyes in turn. It's damning stuff. Enough to trigger serious investigations, possibly criminal charges." Their faces paled. "But you're still my siblings, and despite everything, I don't want to destroy you." "How magnanimous," Thomas muttered. I ignored him. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm establishing a family foundation with half of Dad's estate, about $33 million. The foundation will focus on the causes Dad neglected in his pursuit of wealth. Affordable housing, education in underserved communities, support for small businesses with ethical practices." I slid folders across the table to each of them. "Each of you will have a role in the foundation if you want it, with a reasonable salary. But, and this is non-negotiable, you'll also sign these agreements to reform your business practices with regular audits to ensure compliance." "You're blackmailing us," Eliza said incredulously. "I'm offering you a chance to be better," I corrected. "To live up to the values Dad claimed to have, but didn't practice until it was too late." "And if we refuse?" Michael challenged. "Then I'll use part of my inheritance to fund investigations into each of your companies. The evidence goes public. You can fight me in court, but you'll be fighting exposure at the same time." The room fell silent as they digested my terms. "What about the other half of the money?" Thomas finally asked. "I'm keeping some to ensure I can enforce these agreements if necessary. The rest I'll use as I see fit. Likely more philanthropy, maybe some investments in ethical startups, writers, artists." I shrugged. "I haven't figured it all out yet." You've changed, Eliza said quietly, studying me with new eyes. No, Irvia. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just see me clearly for the first time. The negotiations that followed were tense, with moments of shouting and recrimination. Old wounds were reopened, childhood slights rehashed. But by evening, we had reached a tentative agreement. Not reconciliation, we were far from that, but a framework for moving forward. As they prepared to leave, Michael hung back, approaching me awkwardly. For what it's worth, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I think Dad made the right choice. I wouldn't have, but he did. It wasn't an apology, but from Michael, it was significant. I nodded, accepting the closest thing to approval he'd offered me in years. After everyone left, I stood on the terrace overlooking the expansive grounds, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Rachel joined me, having waited discreetly in another part of the house during the meeting. How did it go? She asked. About as well as could be expected, I replied. It's just the beginning, though. A lifetime of patterns doesn't change in a day. No, she agreed, but it's a start. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching darkness slowly claim the landscape. You know, I said eventually, for years I thought Dad was right about me, that I was a failure because I didn't measure success the way he did. Now I realize we were using different yardsticks all along. Rachel smiled. So what will you measure your success by now? I thought about it, feeling the weight of responsibility and opportunity that had been placed on my shoulders. By whether I can use this inheritance to create the kind of change Dad talked about, but never quite managed himself. By whether I can help my siblings become better versions of themselves. By whether I stay true to who I've always been, even with $67 million in my bank account. I turned to face her, suddenly overwhelmed by gratitude for her steady presence in my life. And by the people I keep close to me, the ones who saw my value when I had nothing. Rachel's eyes softened. Those sound like good measures. As the last light faded from the sky, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel when I woke up this morning. Peace. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my adult life, I felt vindicated in the choices I'd made. My father, in his final act, had given me something far more valuable than his fortune. He'd given me the confirmation that staying true to myself had been the right path all along. I wasn't the least successful of his children. I was simply successful in ways that took him a lifetime to understand.